I think I have done my fair share in my limited capacity in terms of exposing the falsehood of leftist historiography, which I think is perhaps the easier thing to do. I think the next few years, and hopefully not decades, will require us to confront the problems with the non-left historiography as well, where there are two sets of problems that I see. One is the acceptance of the frameworks of the left, the worldview of the left, and the facts presented by the left, if they can be called so, in an unthinking fashion. I have never operated with the belief or under the assumption that everything that the left has to present is of no value whatsoever. Accepting some aspect that the left may present doesn't necessarily make us left. It only means that on certain issues, we are capable of applying our own Viveka filters and accepting if there is truth and sense and logic to it. The problem is threefold, as I mentioned. One is the framework, the second is the worldview, and third, of course, is the other facts presented. Now, it's one thing for that historiography to occupy an isolated academic space. But if our experience tells us history has rarely been left in rarefied academic spheres as far as Bharat is concerned, what is taught in colleges and schools becomes the basis for formation of opinions and worldviews of the future. It then gets rolled into policy action before it becomes a political tool. And that's how it has typically worked. That process would be wonderful if it is based in reality, if it is based in or grounded in good intentions, with a sound understanding of how Bharatiya, specifically Sanatani, Darshnik, and let's say theological worldviews operate. I could be wrong, and I've been pilloried for saying this in the past, but nevertheless, I think it's important for us to speak the truth somewhere. I think we are way past the sell-by date of bashing the left. I think that job has been done significantly over the last 6-7 years, thanks to the work of several, let's say, legends and authors and stalwarts in their own right, including Dr. Sampath, Sri Sanjeev Sanyal, and others. And let's say peer to authors like me who have built on the works of stalwarts in the past and the present. Now I think it's time to look inward and correct some of the legacy issues that continue to haunt us. And I think there are two sets of issues that I'd like to point out in terms of areas of homework, if I may put it that way. First is the question of understanding the outgroup, and therefore what are these external threats in terms of the threats that have existed in the past and how they continue to be present. And I also believe, as academics or historiographers, it is not enough if we merely archive or chronicle the past. We must also endeavor to formulate solutions which have a policy impact in the present. So one of the things that I think that organizations like FIHCR and Brihat and their wonderful synergy produces is a think tank that produces wonderful history and has lessons for the present, which then gets crystallized into policy recommendations through policy think tanks such as Brihat. And that synergy, I think, is something that we should have arrived at long ago. Finally, it's happening, and I'm so happy that I'm in a generation where I'm able to see its work, and I will continue to be around, hopefully, for decades to see how this plays out, and I will actively support it in every way I can. Two, it's always been said, maybe with a certain sense of angst, anxiety, or even retribution, that since the left has done this with the support of the state, maybe the non-left too must replicate it. But increasingly, I'm of the view that the state's role in crafting of history, regardless of who is in power, is deeply problematic. That is perhaps something that is best left to experts. And hopefully, the state will leave that issue to experts to fashion and present itself as a multiplier platform or an amplifying platform with a megaphone in hand, as opposed to interfering with the integrity of the content and its loyalty to truth and facts. Um, Therefore, these institutions and these organizations, which are populated by people who are subject matter experts with a clear sense of understanding of how the subject is to be approached, with respect for dharma, with reverence and veneration for Bharat Mata, which are prerequisites, according to me, when if one wants to serve this civilization through the cause of history or through the medium of history. And the larger issue that I think we will have to address as we go along is the convergence of history, theology, and ontology, where we will have to address the question which has been banished from public spaces thanks to the advent of secularism and modernity, which is the ornamental role that spirituality has been relegated to, which is the foundation of Bharat as a civilization and as a society. And maybe someday we will once again become comfortable talking about consciousness-related issues, rituals, spirituality, yajnas, homas, from public platforms in public spaces without any sense of shame or self-loathing or embarrassment. That I would think would be the ultimate success in terms of our internal success points or metrics. From an external perspective is to break the stereotype that we are so introspective, that we are insular and we are isolationist without any attempt at engaging with the rest of the world. Nothing could be further from the truth if one were to look at the Aryan spirit's ambitions or its ability to action its will on the ground. And I use the word Aryan responsibly in a non-racial sense from a consciousness perspective as a product of this civilization. And I would hope that our historiography also has the ability to build networks and alliances across the world so that the message of Bharat is not limited to a bunch of stereotypes through graveyards built by Mughal invaders and or stereotypes surrounding Bollywood. And Bharatiya history, spirituality, valor, science, and contributions across the pool of human thought becomes a matter of common knowledge in the rest of the world. And we're able to use history as a tool, not a weapon, to build alliances, to effect course correction, and hopefully achieve truth and reconciliation, and trigger the revival of, let's say, natural systems, proto-dharmic systems, or dharmic clonal systems across the world through revival of polytheistic systems across the world. Because I believe that Hindus are safer in a polytheistic world compared to a monochromatic world. So in the interest of our own safety and also in the interest of expanding dharma, our goal must be to revive that across the world and build alliances wherever possible. I don't believe in interfaith dialogues which are meaningless according to me, because those interfaith dialogues try to find if one is the same as the other. We must perhaps operate with the assumption that even if we are not, so what? And those differences must be accepted so long as it doesn't result in the need to annihilate one another. So political spheres of influence, along with theological and historical spheres of influence, those three layers is how I see the way of the future. And obviously, none of this is going to be possible purely through academics. I understand the value of power as a constitutional lawyer and a civil commercial litigator. Therefore, I operate in the realm of economics and power and institutional power in that sense. So I don't operate under any idealistic assumptions of how this can be done by the poor Brahmin or the poor academic himself. That's not going to happen. We need money, we need power, and we also need the media and the conduits to get the job done, to push the message as much as possible, as far as possible. That said, I would wish, and this is a genuine auspicious hope, that platforms and initiatives in this direction never run out of resources whatsoever, And hopefully they don't have to depend on state largesse to get the job done. They can depend on the state to create a path, but the money should come from the society to increase stakeholdership as widely as possible. And I remember one of these legendary speeches or lectures of Dr. Kapoor, where he specifically said that there was a point in Hindu history when every rich person would want to be seen as contributing to two things. One is expansion of the Veda and the protection of the cow, Veda Patashalas and Goshalas. And I hope that we come back to a point where these define prosperity, success, and character more than material possessions. And I say this as someone who has who doesn't celebrate poverty. I certainly don't celebrate poverty, but I know that resources, material prosperity cannot be the end goals. They are the means to an end, and hopefully a spiritual end. And if they themselves become the means of the goals, then the kind of dystopian society that all of us would be living in, we could perhaps look at the West to see how all of that would end. And I use the word end in a very responsible way. So not just in the sense of a destination, but that would literally be the end of the Western civilization. So the task, the vision, and the scope of the goals that we have cut out for ourselves, I think, is huge and vast, which means there is a lot of scope for accommodating a lot of people. And therefore, we need not be bogged down by unhealthy competitive spirits. I think there must be a spirit of cooperation as much as possible, respecting the other's strength while being cognizant of one's own strength, and finding ways to complement, synergize, and multiply or amplify. I think that's the way to go forward. I'm so happy that we are in a generation when we can see the institutionalization of such initiatives through private action, along with the kind of support that's coming from the government, which needs to be recognized in the context of Indic knowledge systems, with a wider ecosystem playing its role in terms of generating talent and providing platforms and creating audience as well. All three are important. The messenger, the message, the platform, and the audience. In that sense, I think it's a rectangular, it's a quadrangular equation.